President Trump got some big praise for his first speech to the United Nations General Assembly. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, frequent Trump critic Mitt Romney, and even former primary rival Jeb Bush, all applauding the president's remarks. But the mainstream media, not so much.
The words totally destroying a nation of 25 million people, that borders on the threat of committing a war crime.
The United States is the closest it has been to nuclear war since the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. But in 1962, no one was worried about the mental stability of the President of the United States. No one was worried about the President's reckless impulsiveness. No one was worried about the President's childish need to prove himself.
President Trump spoke to the world today, and for anybody wondering whether he would borrow from recent tweets, make dire threats to North Korea, echo some of the name-calling of the campaign, or restate the America First platform he campaigned and won on, you can rest easy. That's what he did.
A Washington Post headline also describing the speech as menacing, and the New York Times running a headline calling the speech combative. Marie Harf, I'm going to you first on this. I mean, those were news programs.
Some of
they
them.
put
Lawrence
themselves
O'Donnell's not a news program. He's more of a
take your pick.
Person.
Is he a doctor? Because he's questioning the president's mental health.
I think that the speech was different than other speeches we'd seen from presidents at the UN, right? And so reporters were different president, different style. Reporters were trying to capture the tone of it. And they try to do that no matter who's president. The speech was, I would say, dark.
Why?
And because of the tone, I would also say it was menacing. The tone, destroying an entire country, that is, now I'm not saying there's not
in response to a nuclear attack.
But I think that a lot of the language, he mentioned sovereignty something like 22 times and never talked about the power of multilateralism. When you're at the UN, it was almost a compliment to his inauguration speech that was also, I think, pretty dark in tone.
All right, let me tell you who agrees with you, and that is Hillary Clinton. She went on The Late Show yesterday with Stephen Colbert, and she said this. Is this a sod or a cough? Oh, yeah.
I thought it was very dark, dangerous, not the kind of message that the leader of the greatest nation in the world should be delivering. You should lead with diplomacy. You should lead with the commitment to trying to avoid conflict however you can.
You notice she was really challenged there. Well, not by him, but the president then responded with this tweet. After allowing North Korea to research and build nukes while Secretary of State Bill Clinton also, crooked Hillary now criticizes. I want to go back to you, Marie, but I'm going to open this up to the Colonel. Colonel, what do you think?
Well, tone aside, and there's obviously a lot of focus on the Rocket Man comment and all of those
Did you like
pieces.
that?
I did, actually. And, I'm convinced that a lot of the critics did not watch the entire speech, you aside.
Thank you.
Because substantively, it was very strong. We talked about the Marshall Plan, the 70th anniversary, the 230th anniversary of our Constitution. What I really liked is he reminded everybody in the room, from the Middle East to Asia to especially the Europeans, the sacrifices that American servicemen and women have made to bleed, literally bleed, for their freedoms. And what did we do in response? We didn't occupy. We didn't try to seize territory or resources. We created an institution like the United Nations. So substantively was strong. On the North Korea piece, look, we have to change the calculus in the region. That message, I think, was more for China than it was for North Korea. And China right now is fine with the status quo. This is a South Korea, Japan, America problem. And until they believe that the peninsula could fall on our terms, I don't think they'll change it on their terms until they believe that's going to happen.
You make a good point in having to have had to watch the speech in its entirety, right, Lisa? Yep. To really formulate an opinion on that. You wouldn't get that, though, if you watched the mainstream media coverage of this, especially last year.
No, you wouldn't. And President Trump very clearly laid out two different futures that we could have in this world. One that is very bright and promising, or the other if we allow rogue nations like North Korea to continue unchecked. And so I think that was the point he was making there. And I think a lot of Americans and a lot of people around the world are seeing what North Korea is doing and saying, well, that looks pretty dark, that they're threatening Guam. And additionally, regarding the media, look, the media has already demonstrated their bias. That's just statistically proven. We had that survey out not too long ago of the summer coverage of President Trump, media research finding that 91% of the coverage. We even have people like John Dickerson of Face the Nation saying that the media has ruined its own reputation on its own. And I think when you watch some of that coverage and the hyperbole that we see from the media, they actually discredit themselves and hurt themselves, because if everything's at an 11, what is actually an 11? So I think they ruined their own credibility with viewers.
What also wasn't covered, he praised the African Union. He talked about PEPFAR and malaria relief. He talked about the Women's Entrepreneurs Fund. So he talked about a number of multilateral institutions and funds.
His actions, though, you're right. He gives lip service sometimes to multilateral actions, but then he does things like pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Wondershare Filmora is a user-friendly, easy-to-use video editing software.
Need to be held accountable.
No,
he also holds NATO accountable.
I'm just saying the speech yesterday was not about multilateralism. It was about sovereignty, and I don't think that's a biased statement. Yeah. I think
what's wrong with sovereignty? And is there anything that President Trump can do,
Lisa,
that would make you has President Trump said anything that you approve of?
I'm on the show all the time,
has President Trump said or done anything that you approve of?
Not yesterday. He didn't. And
but period, has he said? Have you paid one compliment, or is there anything?
Lisa,
President Trump has done that you approve of?
Let me talk. Every problem he talked about yesterday is not something the United States can solve by themselves.
Which he has said that we will work together when we shared common interests, which he also reiterated throughout the speech.
Let me finish. And everything he said were things we need other countries to do, but his actions often end up alienating our allies. When he criticizes South Korea publicly, when he criticizes NATO.
I think the Japanese right now are feeling pretty reassured.
It's so difficult. We've got the green brain. I'm like, I don't want to cut you up.
Yeah, no worries.
That's the challenge. He needs other countries. He needs other countries, but he often...
Of course we need other countries, but I think it's okay to hold these multilateral institutions accountable.
There has to be a balance.
And the day before, absolutely. And I think the balance has been too tilted for too long.
About the statistics about the media. And, I hold Dickerson and some of the others in a different category. I mean, we are journalists. Yeah. We're not just media. Some of us are journalists, and we're part of the apparatus in this country that are supposed to hold the powerful accountable. So when you say that the media are biased, yes, absolutely. My problem is with the journalists being biased. And when you talk about subjects this important, you have to get the facts right. And so that's where we need to lean in, if you will, because I don't think that they're out there fairly. I think that most people, even in my category, Marie, may not have watched that entire speech. That's the problem I have. And then contextually, you don't have all the facts, right? So you're the exception. You and I are addicted to C-SPAN.
Right.
That's what, I mean, Marie and I have gone out to lunch and just talk about C-SPAN. Yeah. But I mean, that's where we kind of need to get to. So it's not so much about who's right and more about...
I saw the speech about accountability, and it's about holding these institutions accountable.
All right, we've got to leave it there. President Trump and Vice President Pence personally making phone calls to senators to get them on board with the latest effort to repeal Obamacare, whether the GOP can pass the Graham-Cassidy bill and whether the president can help get it done. Plus, Democrats are sounding the alarm, going all out to try to kill the momentum building behind that repeal bill. Are they scared? And will their efforts have any impact at all? And after the show, you can join our live chat by clicking the Overtime tab at foxnews.com/outnumbered or go to facebook.com/outnumberedFNC. That's where the gloves really come off. And you can, of course, tweet us during the show as well. We'll see you there.